I'm often asked if emotional abuse is as bad as physical abuse. It's a big question, and I'm going to answer it in the best way I can. No, they're equally bad. All abuse is a bad thing. There's no way to compare them. They will hit you how they hit you, and they will have a significant impact on your life, particularly if you're a child. There's a study, it's called the ACE study, Adverse Childhood Experiences. And it is one of the most compelling behavioral science studies that I have seen into the impact of abuse on children and the later effects on their life. The CDC, if you go to cdc.org and look up the impacts on your health from childhood abuse, it is significant to the tune of billions of dollars a year. I think $400 billion a year is what the CDC estimates are the costs of our health in this current medical system caused from the abuse that people have experienced as children. And this is abuse that is emotional, physical, spiritual, whatever that abuse is, neglect. It is 10 questions. In the ACE study, they ask you 10 questions of experiences that you might have had between the ages of being born to the age of 18. In that developmental period, any of these things happening to you will have an impact on your health, emotionally and physically. When I was a kid, my experience was such that I had severe abuse from the age of 4 to 8 from a boy that stayed in our home. It had a significant impact on my life. It changed everything about me. My score in the ACE study was a 7 out of 10. When you achieve a 6 out of 10, your chances of committing suicide increase by 1,200%. Your chances to break bones increase by 470%. Your chances of becoming an addict increase by 700%. Your chances of being obese increase by, I don't remember, but significantly. Your chances of cardiovascular disease increase significantly. There's all sorts of things that come up for you. Your life expectancy, I believe, is 60 or 65 if you are somebody with the score that I have. You're not supposed to be able to maintain a real good job. You're not supposed to be able to get an education. I was fortunate in that I grew up in a family that nurtured me in spite of the abuse that I faced from those that entered into my life. I was lucky, right? I had an opportunity that many didn't. The cool thing is that we can overcome this stuff. It doesn't matter what type of abuse you had. It doesn't matter who gave it to you. It doesn't matter if it's physical or emotional. You can think about these things that hit you, and they may have an impact on you the rest of your life. However, you can overcome them because we have the methods to do it. So, if you're a person wondering, is physical worse than mental? The answer is they're both bad. They're equally bad. They're both destructive to who you are mentally and physically and emotionally. They impact your ability to focus, to hold a job, to have relationships. It is something that you want to dive into, and it impacted me severely through much of my life in ways that I did not understand until I had dealt with it. And I worked through several modalities of therapy that helped me get over it. But I remember taking this ACE score, which to me is astonishing when it has such a significant impact on our health and the performance of everyone. And 2/3 of Americans have at least a score of 1 from childhood experiences of abuse. And that is impacting their life. So we can get help. And I would recommend, if you're somebody that's looking at this, I would recommend that you look up Dr. Bessel van der Kolk and read his book, The Body Keeps the Score. Because your body does keep the score. Whatever that abuse is that happens to you when you are in a state of trauma and haven't dealt with it, you will hold it within your body, which is going to cause you to have the health problems that you face. I have broken tons of bones. I have suffered from asthma. I have suffered from pulmonary embolisms. I have had overweight problems. I have had trouble holding jobs in my past. I've had all kinds of things. I was barely able to graduate from high school. These are all things that hit me. And when I read Bessel van der Kolk's book, it was so comforting to read something that was like a map of my soul and recognize that I'm not alone in this. There's a whole world of people out there that have faced the very thing I faced, some to way worse extremes than me. And they have overcome those challenges using techniques that are available to become active and contributing and healthy and vibrant people in our community. That is something that all of us can do because we have the knowledge to overcome and we can do this. So once you begin to understand that, once you begin to know, hey, I may have experienced physical abuse, and you quit saying, well, maybe at least it's not as bad as emotional abuse. Quit trying to compare it and just say, this is what it is. Or, I had sexual abuse. Is that worse than physical abuse or emotional abuse? Well, yeah, it's all the same. It's just another version of the bad, right? It doesn't matter. Don't worry about comparison. When we begin to compare, what we're trying to do is separate ourselves from the problem by saying, well, that's worse, or I've had it worse. Whatever the case is, you're not a winner in that space. So you have to stop looking at abuse in that way, and you have to start looking at it as in, how is this hindering my personal performance? And when I was 35, I cheated on my wife. And I will never forget that time. I walked out to my car and I collapsed beside it and I was shaking and overcome with disgust at myself. I could not believe I had done what I had done. I could not believe that that was a part of my existence and that I had done this to a person I was supposed to love. I couldn't understand it and I wanted to kill myself desperately. In that space, as I sat there thinking about that thing, I had 2 children at the time, little kids. They were little. And I could not think of a way of killing myself that would ensure that they never found out that I had committed suicide, because I didn't want them to be scarred by that from me. I wanted to just disappear. I wanted to just be wiped away. And I realized that the only way to get beyond this for me and keep my kids safe from the harm that I could cause them from killing myself was to get better. And the only way to get better was to learn to love who I am. And the thought, when I would think about who I was, I would be shaken with convulsions and shivers of disgust. That's how I felt about who I was. And that's probably why I cheated, right? Well, I know why I cheated, but that's part of the reason why. Because I was so disgusted with who I was in the first place. And so I began the process of researching performance techniques, mindset, going into therapy, doing all these things to try to build myself and learn how to function in a space that wouldn't require me to constantly be wishing I was dead. I had been struggling with suicide my whole life. And that step, that crisis, that mistake, that profound mistake, became the catalyst through which I found health and healing and changed my life. And I still regret that I did it. I wish I could have learned another way. I didn't. This is how I learned. And that's what I got. And I get to own that, and I get to recognize that this does not diminish me. And that was a very, very tricky thing to do because I was thinking that I was diminished before I even did that bad thing. And that was like the worst thing I could think to do next to murder. That's how I felt about it. And so here I sat struggling in my space because I was comparing myself to others, thinking all the time, why do I feel so bad about who I am? I've had a great life. I've had lots of opportunities. How come I'm so pathetic? How come I'm so weak? This was my conversation, this comparison, right? I'm looking for better reasons to give myself for why my behavior was so bad. I was looking for reasons to avoid owning what I needed to own because I was scared to admit what had really happened to me. Eventually, I got into enough therapy and got enough help and did enough research that I eventually started offering myself compassion. So if you are somebody that has been abused, start there. Start with compassion for who you are. Look into yourself and love the darkness that you see. The darkness that you see is the very thing that you need to love to allow it to dissipate and see who you truly are. Without it, you will be overcome and unable to act and stuck in trauma and reacting and doing things and acting out and bleeding out and making yourself do more that will make you feel bad about who you are because you're lost. You don't get to see your value while you're stuck in this cycle of abuse that makes you compare and wonder, what's the worst one? Is it okay that I'm so messed up? Because all I did was get physically abused. I didn't get sexually abused. Or all it was emotional abuse. It wasn't physical. Or I don't know, right? I don't know how you approach it, but don't approach it with comparison. Approach it with compassion. Approach it with kindness, with love, with support, and reach out and find somebody to help you. There is significant changes that can happen in your life. I want you to just look at me right now. And I want you to imagine me at 233 pounds, exhausted, not able to walk more than a mile up a hill because I was so overcome with all that I was carrying. My whole body was breaking down. I was sick all the time. I was barely able to function when I got home from work because I was so exhausted from the day of grind that I faced. The whole world was around me, just crushing me down. But when I began to step out and get the help I needed and stopped comparing myself to others, offered myself compassion, got some real therapy, I did an EMDR to start, I was able to finally see myself and let go of my hatred and self-loathing and dismissing of what it was I was facing and really take ownership. That's what's available to you. So the start question, which is worse? That's a sign to me that if you're asking that, you're not looking in the right space. Instead, fix whatever it is you got. It's fixable, and there are methods to do it. And you can come out feeling better, having a productive, great life. People have done this in way worse situations than me. People that have survived Auschwitz have become incredible contributors to society, functional, engaging, fun. So you can do this. You can do this. And if you're struggling with this right now, I want you to check out my next video coming up, How to Feel Worthy of Love. This is something we all are worthy of. Thanks for joining me. Like, subscribe, follow. I'm James Burnham.